Welcome to the Descenso Zone podcast, where we talk about creativity and personal growth through a lens of curiosity and humor. My guest today is Alex Ganetakos, an award-winning writer and producer who's worked across almost every TV genre. Her credits include 16, Hotel Transylvania, Paw Patrol, Canadian Idol, Total Drama, Dylan's Playtime Adventures, and many, many more. We talk about her journey into the TV and film industry, the craft of writing and pitching, and what it was like writing for some of your favorite shows. Now, let's get into the zone with Alex Ganetakos. Alex, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you.
It's great to have you on. I'm excited to talk to you. You're a prolific television writer and producer. You've worked across many, many genres and iconic shows. We've worked on a bunch of projects together. So I know some of your story already, but for those who don't, what was your entry point into the world of TV and film, and what drew you to this ridiculous career path?
Well, I started in theater, and that is even less lucrative. So after a few years of trying to make it after school in the theater business, and actually just working at the information booth at Queens Quay Terminal and stuff like that, I found out that there was a new variety show coming to CBC, and they were looking for interns, like PAs, the base level, you don't need to know anything kind of job, where you show up first, you leave last, you get paid the least amount of money. But it was a gig. And so I went in, I had a job interview with the executive producers, and they said yes. And I showed up on the first day of the job, and I realized that a lot of the people in the room were related to either executives at CBC, like myself, because my dad was an exec at the time, or the child of the TV critic for the Globe and Mail, things like. So I was like, oh, okay, I see why I've been hired. But then you do the job, right? So you prove yourself when you get there. And I guess I proved myself, because then they asked me to come back. It was for a week, originally for Rita and Friends. That was the variety show. And then they asked me to be a backstage coordinator, and then they wanted me to be a production secretary on another show. And so I started working full time for this producer at CBC. And then as I was doing that, I was still making theater on the side with my little theater company. And when we put a show on, other people I was working with happened to find out, and they were like, so wait, you're a writer too? And then that kind of it blossomed from there. One of the shows I was working on was called Comics. I was the production secretary. But then when they realized I was also a writer, they were like, maybe you can help these stand-up comics with their sketches, because it had this B-roll section where you'd have to do a little filming on the street, and there'd be some kind of. So I was helping. Not every stand-up writer knows how to write sketch or story, so I was helping all these great talented people with that. And then someone down in the children's section was like, hey, would you want to write some interstitials for us? And it just sort of kept going from there. And then I started writing award shows as well. And that was when things got, sort of bigger and busier. Helping, again, working with people in the trenches on comics who wanted to be producing the award shows. So I helped them make a pitch to produce the off-camera, the pre-show award shows, and we got the gig. And so then suddenly I was the head writer on the first two nights of the Geminis back then. Now the the Screen Awards, and talking with all these stars, telling them what to say, and then it just sort of kept going from there. Then I was on the award show circuit. And I did the East Coast Music Awards, and that's where I met Rick Mercer. And he was like, hey, would you ever want to write on Made in Canada? If you want to send us a spec, we'll see. We've just done the first season, and we're probably going to need more writers for season 2 and beyond. So I did that, and and they were like, we want to use it in the show. And then that just it kept going from there. And then I'm meeting comedy people and live action people, and then all the award show stuff, working with the same company a lot of the time, Insight Productions. When they got the Canadian Idol gig, they asked me if I wanted to be a producer on it, overseeing the writing. And then that was like another that for once I was working on a show that people had heard of, you know, all those years of telling, oh, I write on this, and they're like, oh, I don't watch a lot of Canadian television. But then finally saying Canadian Idol, people knew they had an opinion, even though it hadn't even been on the air yet. People had an opinion, they knew what it was, so that was pretty exciting.
Wow,
Um,
that is quite the trajectory. So you started as a PA, worked into
yeah,
being a production secretary, and then sort of like snuck into like writing opportunities in a way. I feel like
yeah,
that's a really common like way that people like I've heard a lot of writers say like, oh, I started in production and kind of let
yeah,
everyone know that I wanted to be a writer and sort of snuck into these
yeah.
little opportunities that came up.
Yeah, for sure. I really think that is, you got to seize the day, and you're just being in the room increases your potential of getting the job that you really want. If you're anywhere in that room, like getting coffee means you're talking to those people, and if they get to know you, like I didn't even have to sell myself as a writer. I just kept writing because I wanted to write anyway, and I'm making plays with my friends, and I just like put a poster up trying to get people to come see the show at the Fringe Festival. I'm like, oh, we need to sell tickets. So I wasn't even necessarily angling for a TV gig as a writer, but then it was like, okay, great, this is working out.
If you are someone who's, maybe a PA or early in their career trying to get, into those spots, would you suggest that they like let people know that they're like, if I'm a PA and I'm just bringing in the coffees, do I be like, hey guys, I also have some scripts if you want to read them with this coffee? Or does it have to be more subtle? Do you have to build those relationships over a long time?
I mean, I can only really speak from my experience, which was a subtle long game, right? Like I was getting to know people over time, and I continued to write on the side. And then, you get to know people. I don't like to talk about myself. This whole experience is very weird for me. And like when I was working as a production secretary, I'm like, this is the job. This is what I'm doing. I'm going to do the best that I can. And but then eventually you're having lunch with your coworkers and you're talking about other things. I do think there might be something off-putting for some people about walking into a room and saying, I'm also a writer. Like that might be something that, because, I've had a lot of people over the years saying, oh, I'd love to be a writer. I'm a writer. And they're
Mhm.
talking about emails, they're talking about,
Right.
I did this presentation 5 years ago. It's like, okay, that's cool. So for me, it worked out that it was a slow burn. But I know other people, it's like it it probably can't hurt to mention it, to say if you ever want to read anything. And I probably don't take advantage of those opportunities enough. Like all the people that and it's like you everyone's always looking for something new and something fresh, and I think there are ways to become that new hot writer. When you get that first gig, suddenly people want to work with you and things kind of fall into place, just like actors suddenly show up, and it's like that guy who you never heard of a year ago is now in 5 movies. Like I feel like that happens with writers too. People start talking about you, they start sharing information. Everyone wants to make a good show and they want good people on it. So
Yeah, I agree. I think you have to promote yourself, I guess, but in a way that is authentic and not pushy and not because it can also be too much, right? Like if you're just
yeah, that fine line.
yeah, it is a little bit of a dance, but you want to, I think for me, it's like build the relationship first. Like be friends with these
Yeah.
people, make sure that they're even open to like receiving something like that. And then 99 times out of 100, in my experience, it's like, yeah, I'd love to read a thing that you've written, you know? And, I sent early in my career, I sent a handful of writers a bunch of stuff, and it was terrible. And they told me it was terrible, and but then I fixed it, right? And then it got better. And then they read it again, and they were like, "Oh, this is way better." Like, oh, he can actually take notes. He can actually improve this, and that like so much of the need of a head writer on a show is like someone who can take direction.
Yes, just like an actor, right? You need to serve the voice of the show as a writer. And someone who's too precious about, well, I put that word there for a reason, is probably going to struggle unless they're creating their own stuff, right? If you want to make your own thing, go for it. There's so much technology available now. Anyone can make their own documentary or sitcom or whatever. But if you want to work with other people, you have to be able to, parry and work with it. And the whole concept of the process of writing, which is you've got a premise, then an outline, then a first draft, a second draft. At the beginning of my career, I was like, what the hell? But it's fine. It's not fine. There's always more you can do. And the more experience you get, the more you realize, thank God there's going to be a second draft and a polish and then a production draft. And then because things change, and the more you read something, you little things bump you and you kind of let them go. But if you read it over enough, you don't let it go and you realize, no, that needs fixing too. So yeah, and it's such a collaborative business. If you don't want to collaborate, be a painter, write a novel, and don't have anyone edit it. I mean, I don't recommend it.
If you're enjoying this podcast, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. It's the free, easy way to support the channel, and it lets the algorithm know that I'm not just talking to my mom. If you do subscribe, my promise to you is to make the podcast the best it can be and to continue to bring on new and interesting guests every week to talk about creativity and personal growth. Thanks for being a part of this journey. Now, let's get back into the zone. I want to talk a little bit more about the process that you laid out there, like the outline, first draft, and so on. Because for me, when I'm writing a script, especially if it's like the outline is always the hardest part for me because it's like the generative phase where you have to like come up with ideas and figure out where you're going. Although if you've workshopped an idea in a writing room with a group of writers, it tends to have a little more of a what they call beats. In other words, just like point by point ideas about where the story's going and what it might be like. But then when I'm writing the first draft, I feel like there's two camps. And my camp that I'm in is I just write the worst possible thing I can write. I know because like the blinking blank page is like the most intimidating thing for me, and I'm sure for a lot of writers, right? And so like if I can just get that, just any words on the page, by the time I'm on like page 3, maybe like page 3 and 4 are actually okay. And then like page 5 and 6, I'm like, I don't know what to do. So it's just terrible again. And then page 7 and 8, I'm like, okay, those pages were okay. And then I can go back to page 1 and kind of fix everything. That's kind of my way of doing it. But I know there's other writers who will sometimes write in reverse and they'll write the ending first and then they'll go backwards. Or sometimes there's writers who will like need a perfect draft from the moment that it comes out. It's like every word is meticulously figured out from the beginning and every sentence has to be right. Is there a style that you have? And do you think there's any, I don't know if a right or wrong way is the right term, but is there a preferred way that you do it?
I do have a method. Early days when I was really worried all the time about not being good enough, not doing it right. I would get hamstrung by the blank page for sure. And then I had this breakthrough moment um, working on Made in Canada, the Rick Mercer sitcom, where I was trying to write the script and I just wasn't sure what to do. And I can't remember, I think it was a fellow writer, Ed McDonald, who gave me the suggestion. He was like, just skip the parts you don't know, write the stuff you do know, and then you can come back. So then I did that, and I was like, I don't even know how I'm going to handle this scene, so I just jumped to the next one, like where I knew I could put some funny in, where I could hear it in my head, and just put it down. And so that was like my version of a barf pass, as Emer calls it, right? Like where you just go and put anything out there to get it on the page. And did that, and then went back and started filling in the in-betweens. And by the time I got to the end, just by grabbing those few scenes and filling those in, it was like, oh, there's a running joke here now. Like I've planted something halfway through. I'm like, oh, if I plant that seed earlier. And then it just helped kind of feed itself. And now I find though, I mostly don't do that anymore because I have so much more experience. I can just sort of push through. But I do find that I'm cognizant of length, the page length, the time. I don't like to do a barf pass if I can help it. Like I'll write a bit long, but I don't like to write too long because then I just have to kill all my babies. I have to like get rid of all the jokes. And then, so I write a little bit long just to not be completely hamstrung. But I also am not like, okay, I'm just going to write 60 pages and then I'll bring it down to 11. Like that's a nightmare to me. I mean, it can be done, but I don't want to. So
Yeah, I think there's a balance, at least for me, there's like a balance where I'm like, I want to write a little bit long just because I know I'm gonna have to cut it up and fix it
Yeah.
later. So it's like I'll just get anything I can on the page, and then it's so much easier for me to like fix than to generate.
Right.
And so I will that's been my process that's worked for me, and that's evolved over time as well. So I'm sure everyone like has a process that changes over time, and it sounds like yours has too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think probably if I was to get into, if I started working on a show that I hadn't, like a genre style of show I had never done before, I might go back to the just skip it. If you don't know, just skip it. Don't get paralyzed. Just write something. Um, but yeah, right now at least, I've been doing animation and kids animation for so long at this point that it's like, okay, what's your page? Like I'll ask like, how many pages do you want? And then I try and keep that in mind as I go. I'm like, well, geez, I'm on, in the outline, this is a third of the way through, but I'm already halfway through the script. Oh boy. And I can't help but notice that after editing scripts for years too, right? Like, yeah, so I try to that voice, but also I'm glancing at the page count all the time. So
Right. Well, it's probably good advice to keep an eye on the page count for sure.
it
How
helps.
does your writing process change? Like, because you've written on so many different kinds of shows, so many different genres, so many different age ranges. Does the process change for you at all? Like, if you're writing a preschool show versus like a Rick Mercer show, or is it sort of structurally kind of the same and you're just doing different types of content?
I mean, they're like, if it's storytelling, if it's drama, which would include a sitcom or like a story. The process is the same. I think you think about your audience, who's receiving the jokes. I mean, the through line in all my work is comedy, so I think about the audience that's going to be getting the comedy thrown at them. Is it like an award show audience, or is it a bunch of kids? But even when it's kids, it's like the parents are in the room too, and I think about them, and I think about they will turn this thing off or they will change the channel if it sucks, if it's offensive, um, if I can slip in some jokes that they find funny, then I'm always like, there should be a joke in every preschool kid show. There should be at least one joke that's for the parents, because they're either listening while they're in the kitchen or they're sitting beside the kid or whatever, because they're there. I don't want to ignore them, and so I think about that. And like what kind of jokes are going to fly with someone who's 4 versus someone who's 40. You know.
Right. Is there a piece of common writing advice that you maybe disagree with? For me, it's like I always hear, "Oh, you should write what you know." And I sort of disagree with this a little bit because I'm like, okay, well, I just recently I wrote an hour-long murdery female-led thriller. And I'm like, okay, but I'm not a female or a murderer as far as I know. So
That we know of.
yeah, that we know of. But it's like, okay, at its core, this show is about relationships and a sibling relationship. And so I can draw on my relationship with my sibling and sort of fold that in. But like I didn't know about murdery stuff. So like you had to kind of just learn about that and take some time to figure out what someone might do in this situation or my character is also a gymnast. I've never done gymnastics. So it's like you had to learn about some of that stuff to figure it out. So I don't know. That's sort of some common advice that I disagree with. Is there anything either that or something else that you maybe disagree with?
Well, I hear what you're saying about that advice. I will say that the business right now is not very amenable to people writing outside of their own world, unless it's fantasy, sci-fi. Maybe murder mystery falls into that too. But like if you're doing a comedy, if I'm writing a comedy and there's no character in that show that looks or sounds anything like me, that I'm not tapping into my own personal experience, I don't know that I can even pitch it anywhere these days.
What do
So
you
there's
think that
that.
is? Do you think it's because your personal experience is so tied to the show that people feel like, oh, if this person isn't injecting some of themselves into the show, that it's not going to work? Is that
I don't know if it's even, I don't know if there's even logic to it. I do think there is something to um, when people write stuff that's more personal to them, it cuts deeper. It can be something that affects you as you read it in a way it's like, wow, I this is not my life experience at all, but I'm reading about this other person. I feel like I'm living their life right now. Like there is something really compelling about that that's harder to do when it's fantasy or whatever, unless you're pulling into your own personal experience. Like as you're writing about a gymnast, you're probably thinking about your experience in Taekwondo, right? And your background there, right? Training and like competitions and stuff. You can tap into all of that, right? So you're probably drawing, and there's relation sibling stuff. Obviously, you have a sibling, so like you can pull into things. Um,
Yeah, and there is a fantasy, not to get too much into this pilot that I wrote, but there is a fantasy element to it as well. So it's like, some supernatural stuff going on as well. So it's a little bit out there, and I can get away with certain things that maybe I couldn't if I was writing a more grounded sitcom, for example.
right? Yeah, like if you're doing a detective show and you have no experience as a journalist or as a detective or anything like that, you could probably still write an amazing show. It just probably would be harder to get it made right now. So I feel like that advice is like the practicalities of what people are buying, like what networks are buying. um, it's good to have a little fantasy. People want to escape, right? Like, what does the market want right now? And I think there's a lot of nervousness around having a show represent any group without a member of that group at the head, at the creative forefront of the show, you know? So I feel like that's where that advice kind of makes sense right now. But I agree with you. Like, if you want to write a sci-fi show, no one has sci-fi experience. Like you, no one has been in deep space and written about it, but you could still write about deep space and think. But again, in a sci-fi show, you're drawing on life. You're looking at the planet as it is right now, and you're saying, how do I do a parallel of that in a fictional way that makes the audience go, huh, this actually makes me think about the struggles with racism in North America right now, or whatever the thing is that you're tapping into.
You've written so many different genres of things. Is there anything that's maybe harder than the other, or something you enjoy more? Like you've sort of fallen lately, at least, into more of the kids animation space. Is that something that you really love and find easier to write than adult comedy, or is that just where the opportunities kind of landed?
It's sort of where the opportunities landed. It's where the trajectory took me. And within any genre, there's going to be shows that are easier to write and harder to write, like shows that are more in line with my voice and ones that are not. Like there are cartoons that I could not write because I'm not an action writer, I'm not that. Like I did an episode of Kingdom Force, which is a CBC cartoon. These animals, it's action, it's vehicles, it's all this stuff. And I was like, my pitches were like, all their cars break down. So now they're just hanging out talking. Like, I really, my forefront is not kung fu and like describing, flips and stuff like that. But if I have to, I can do it, but it's like that. I found that one really hard. I found a way, I found a pitch that worked. Yeah, day one of pitching was like, oh, I should not be in this. Oh no, they hired the wrong person. And then I was like, let me think, let me pitch again tomorrow. And I came back with a couple of pitches that were closer, and then did one of them. And then they were like, would you like to write another? And I was like, no, it was too hard. It was hard.
I feel like writers are very hard on themselves, yourself included. So I'm sure it was a great pitch because they asked you to keep writing more. So
There is that. And funnily enough, it was actually nominated for a CSA eventually, that script.
okay, okay,
Like,
Alex,
what?
okay.
So I'm like, okay, so I should be taking more jobs where I really feel like I can't do it because then I'll get more nominations. I don't know. Who can say?
On the topic of nominations, how important is that world? Like all the CSAs and the Emmys and the WGC awards, all these writing specific awards. Do they, I mean, look, it's nice to be nominated. It's nice to win
As
awards.
you know, as you know, yes.
Yes, I was very, very lucky to win a Writers Guild award, which was very great.
Skilled and deserving, yes.
Thank you. Alongside with my writing partner, Ben Joseph, who's the best.
Yeah.
But I guess my question is like, do they do anything aside from like being a nice ego thing, or is it like do they push your career forward in a way? Does someone come to you and say, "Oh, you have a CSA nomination, let me hire you for this thing," or is it sort of more?
I have to ask my agent, I guess, if like having that. I feel like that window of being nominated until the awards happen is this window of opportunity where you could be like, if you have a pitch in your pocket, if you want to be having meetings, it's like if you're freshly nominated for something, then people kind of maybe pay a bit more attention. Once the awards are over, it's if you won, then you get a little attention a little longer. Maybe you can kind of like, she just won this, and this is her new, maybe. But yeah, I think it's mostly ego, and I think it's mostly it kind of makes us all hate each other and be jealous of each other in a really shitty way. It's not the best system, and it's sort of also, honestly, I do feel a lot of times like we're given awards so that we don't have to be given a proper wage, and like I think it's, let's pat these little artists on the back, let's let them feel good about themselves, pat them on the head, and then off you get. While the producers, who also like to pat themselves because they don't want to miss out on that. The networks don't want to give anyone any money. I do feel like not every industry does this. Not every industry has like an annual award for just working and just being there. And really, for me, the big award, the reward is people watching, people enjoying the show. Like my one of my cousins, my husband's cousins, reached out the other day to say her 3-year-old, maybe she's 4 now, her new favorite show is a show that I ran a few years ago. And I'm like, I mean, that is satisfying, That feels good. Like, I want to entertain, I want people to be happy. And so when I find out that people actually like the stuff I'm doing and are happy about it, then I'm like, okay, well, that works for me.
It is a nice feeling. I agree. I think that's like totally the most, mm, I don't know. I guess it's like the nicest compliment you can get, more than even an award or anything like that. I had a little kids book that I wrote, just like a little very
Yeah,
short kids book,
great.
and it sold like 9 copies,
No.
mostly to my friends. But even just hearing my friends be like, my kid loves this book. It was like, I
Right?
was like, it was worth it then. Like, it was worth it to do it for me, because I'm like, it's their little bedtime story. It's part of their life now. It's like a cool little feeling. So even though it's like, it sold 9 copies, I don't care. It's like, it's just for my friends. That's fine, but, and I'm sure that feels the same way when you're writing TV. And like, I've definitely heard the same thing too, where it's like, oh, I watched your episode of this. Like, it was so cool to watch that. And that to me
Yeah.
is even more valuable than, some award.
Yeah. And I mean, when you're doing the storytelling, when like, this was an idea that I brought to the room, and then I was able to turn it into a script, and then it made it to television, and it came from me, and now it's there forever. Like, that's exciting. That's rewarding. Early days of writing for television, a lot of my work was invisible. Like writing for Canadian Idol, it's like you have to no, people were like, wait, there's writers? And it's like, yeah, because it has to be structured. We had to figure out the show. We have to, everything that the host says is written. All of those packages, there's a voiceover. Someone writes that. But you don't want to be showy with it. So I got used to invisible writing and not needing the ego boost of it, of people saying, oh, you're the big kahuna. I never say that word. Why do I say it then? So, and yeah, ego gets in the way, I think. Ego can make you make bad choices because you're thinking about, how am I going to look? How is this going to affect my story of me? And how, like getting that job title. Like, I feel like credit also, I'm like, I don't want to get bogged down with whether I'm a story editor or an executive story editor or a producer or a consultant because everyone's perspective on those credits varies. Like, my agent doesn't value some of the credits that I've earned. He thinks it's better to get a different kind of, and I'm like, I just want to work and I want to make shows, and people who I work with will know, and then they're going to want to work with me on something else. And that's really how it goes, right? It's the people you work with then tell someone else about you, or have another show and pull you in for it, or what, you know?
Yeah, that's the credits thing is interesting. I've talked about this a little bit with my friend Merrill Hagen, who's also an animation writer, and he was kind of saying the same thing, where it's like the credits are so nebulous. It's like we don't really know what the difference between a co-producer and a consulting producer and a co-executive and there's just all these titles that are a little bit meaningless, and
Yeah,
like
especially in animation, like they don't correlate with like Canadian animation specifically, like they don't line up with any other standard. So then what? You know, like I've been a head writer on so many shows, and but in the role it doesn't say head writer, but everyone knows what I did. So, you know, the people who need to know so that they can hire me for the next thing, like, yeah.
right, yeah, it's definitely a little confusing, and it's I think different in the might be different in the American system too, but I know it's different between like animation and live action. Live
Yeah,
action being like real people,
yeah.
and I've had a story editor credit on a live action thing,
Right.
which in animation terms is like the head writer credit,
Yes.
but I
Yeah.
wasn't the head writer because they assign it differently in live action. So it's a very weird system. Hopefully we can get that figured out at some point. But
Yeah, I mean it's pretty Byzantine. I don't know. I mean, I've participated with like the WGC bargaining system, right? Like getting to get, the every three
the
years.
Writers Guild of Canada.
Yeah, the and the production agreement between the Writers Guild and the Producers Guild every 3 years it comes up for renewal, and then the writers say we'd like more of this, please, and we'd like a bit more money and a bit more of this, and the Producers Guild says we'd like to pay you less and give you less, and that's the battle. They're trying to figure out their bottom line, and same with us, and so and like credit is a thing that comes up, and it's just
Mhm.
like the agreement, the original agreement is just so Byzantine, and trying to change anything requires so many people to agree, and so many amendments have to be that most of the time you just go, you know what? F it. It's fine.
Yeah, I understand. You mentioned you've been a head writer in a lot of writing rooms. How do you approach being, a more leadership role in a writing room as opposed to when you come in and you're just like pitching as like I guess what they would call like a staff writer?
Well, I mean, when you're a staff writer, you're trying to give uh, the show what it wants. You're trying to match your writing style to the voice of the show. And when you're the head writer, you have to trust your voice and your style, and because that is why they've hired you. It took me a while to figure that out. Like my first head writer gig was for 16, and when they offered, I'd written for it for a couple of seasons, and they were like, "Would you like to?" The people who were running it were moving on to other stuff. Yeah, and then I wasn't sure what to do because my scripts had very little uh, changes when they would come back, and second draft and stuff. There wasn't that much difference, so I thought that was the gig, and then I was informed that I was wrong. That in fact the gig was to make other scripts that didn't seem the same, and that was basically trust your voice. How would you write this scene? If this, as you're reading it, doesn't feel like what you would do, then do what you would do, because that's what they've hired you for. That's why they want you particularly. My samples, my scripts were the template in the end. And it took me a little bit to realize that. And then you have to believe in yourself. You have to be confident, and you have to be, open to ideas, because it's still a collaboration, and people are going to come in with like left field concepts that sometimes will be like, oh my God, we really needed this. And if you're not listening to other people's ideas, you're really going to miss out. So that's, I think, the big job is hearing all the ideas, and then sorting and saying, these are the ones. And then just trying to make it happen.
So yeah, so you're really curating ideas and
Yeah.
trusting your taste.
Yeah. Yeah. And managing expectations, managing your writing team, keeping communication going. Um, and it really goes from like when you're a freelance writer for a show, you get an assignment, and for a week you're like and then you send it off, and you're like, well, I hope it's good. We'll find out when I get the notes, and you're free to like go to the grocery store or whatever. And when you're a head writer, it's just like every day is like, oh god, now there's this and now there's that, and so like is like all the time. But then but then you have so much more influence over what the show will be. And it's still, in animation, you only have so much influence because then it goes to board, it goes to storyboard, it goes to the directors, and depending on the communication, depending on the access you have, like a head writer on animation could be handing in that script and then never see anything again. That's when producer credits happen more, if you're going to be also seeing the boards and giving notes and having input on that kind of stuff. Then you're producing more than just being a writer. But like honestly, if they don't give me the producer credit, I'm still happy to give, to help, because like
You want the show to be
so
good.
hard. You want the show to be good. I want it to be a
Yeah.
hit. I want every show to have like 10 seasons. And mostly they don't, I've done a lot of season one heavy lifting to get a show off the ground. And sometimes they go to two, three, four. A lot of times they don't. So you just have to keep pushing. But
I'm sure a lot of people listening might want to be a writer. Is what would separate, like, as a head writer, what would separate like a good freelance writer to from a great freelance writer?
well, I mean, you mentioned earlier being able to take a note and run with it. Being able to plus what's been given to you, I think, is like a real key of between good and great. I mean, good writers will give you what you've asked for. A great writer will give you that and more. Like they will see more and offer extra, um, and uh, and lift it, in a way so you don't have to lift it so much. Like I think that's the difference. And then the great writers are the ones that you want to bring back again and again. They're the ones that you call your ringers, like you on Superwise, comic book adventures. It's like there are people I know will lift this material and make it better, and we won't have to work so hard when it comes back to us to make sure it conforms with the rest of the series and all the other scripts. And you were definitely 100% one of those writers on that last series we both worked on. And, like and they're writers who are really talented, but their voice doesn't maybe quite match, or their sensibility doesn't quite match. And then you just maybe you don't call them again, But the ones where you're like, oh well, that worked. Oh my god, like you want the person who makes less work for you as a head writer is who you want to work with.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say. And that was such a fun show to work on. And I think working with you and the whole team really taught me. Like I learned how to write for that show by watching you, and all the other team members as well, Mike and a bunch of other people who worked on that show. Um, just reading the scripts was like an education for me. And so that for me was like, okay, reading all the scripts, being in the room, getting your tone and the sense of the show, and also working in the educational element because it's a preschool show, so there's educational elements as well. So I really appreciate you saying that, but I think it was largely because of your influence and the influence of the team that really helped me understand the show, and that allowed me to write it in a voice that I thought was closest to what you would do yourself. And I think so much of that is what the like you've sort of touched on this already. It's like when you're a freelance writer working on a show, it's like your job is to give the head writer the show that they would write. They
Yeah,
just don't
yeah,
have time to write it,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
that's what I tried to do, and I hopefully it worked out. But
Oh, 100%. Well, I mean, like on Dylan's Playtime Adventures, right? Like you also wrote on that. And that's how I knew when we were looking for writers for Super Why. I'm like, well, Mike is terrific. I don't know if he's ever done educational stuff, but like, let's give him a crack at it. And boy, did you knock it out of the park. So that's why we kept calling, that's
All right. Well, thanks, Alex, but no more, no more. I can't take any more
It's not more about
approval.
you, Mike.
I
How great
don't
you
do
are.
well
Come
with it.
on. It's all
Um,
true.
okay, you mentioned 16,
Yeah.
which is sort of like a cult classic at this point. 16, total drama. I mean, you've also worked on big shows like Paw Patrol and all these, like you've worked on so many iconic shows. Why do you think that these shows like still resonate today?
Well, 16 was a delight because it's a sitcom. It's a sitcom, right? And so that really worked with my sensibilities and my experience. And I think that's why it still works. It's like friends talking about relationship struggles and personal issues, but they're teenagers. It was Friends for teens, right? And so the fact that Friends is still a hit show, I mean, Tom and Jen were very smart to say, what if we made that, at a mall and we make it with, teenagers working at a mall?
Sorry,
It was,
Tom and Jen being
oh,
the,
Tom McGillis
yes,
and Jennifer Perch, who created
yes.
16. Yeah, it was very clever. And I came in pretty early. They'd written, I think, their first 13 episodes. And it was still called The Mall when I joined the team. And then they realized, oh, let's change it, which is good. Yeah, 16 is a great title. And yeah, and I think that's why it still resonates because it's relatable conversations and relatable pickles that you can, whether you're 12 and aspirationally watching the show, thinking about what it's going to be like when you're a cool teenager or maybe not so cool teenager, or whether you're 40 and you're like, oh God, I know what that's like. You can really relate to it. Because, of course, there was no one 12 writing the show, right? We're all tapping into our real lives. And that's, I think, to bring it back to right what you know. I think when you're writing comedy, especially, but probably also drama too. I don't do a lot of drama, so I can't speak to that. But bringing in a premise, bringing in an idea that is part of your life, something that has happened to you or to your best friend or someone you know, um, the realness of that is palpable. I think you can really, it's you can feel it when you're watching a show. Like this came from a real place, even though it's gone somewhere completely crazy on this silly sitcom. Um, so I think that's why it still resonates because it isn't just about pop culture jokes that are about the time that the show was made. And I think that's you can't really do that with animation unless you're doing South Park because animation takes like 2 years, from the scripting to actually hitting the air. It can be like so long. So a joke, writing a 6-7 joke, for a show that's not going to be on for 2 years, maybe not the best choice. Fun for the team internally to laugh at, but like in the second draft, you're probably going to want to cut that because it's just not going to be evergreen, as the term goes, right? Like just stays fresh. Whereas if it's about like being embarrassed or slipping just when you're trying to make someone impressed, things like that, that's something we can all relate to forever.
Right. What
Yeah.
about shows like Paw Patrol? What was it like working on that show? And a lot of those preschool shows have a sort of formulaic element to them. Was
Yeah.
there a formulaic element to that? I mean, it seems like there was just from watching, but
Yeah.
how did you interact with that? And what was it like writing for that show?
It was interesting because we had just had our kid. Max was about like 2 years old. The It was started in Toronto. The producer, one of the producers, the voice director, Chuck had worked with when he ran Detention Air.
Chuck being your husband.
Yeah, Charles Johnston, my husband, also a writer. He had a series for 4 seasons called Detention Air. And one of the people working on it then was working over at Spin Master. Like, we literally ran into her in the street. I think I was pushing the stroller, around the corner from home and saw, hey, how you doing? And she's asked, would we ever be available? Would we be interested? We started watching the show. It had just started airing. It wasn't a hit yet. We were watching it and thinking, what is this show? The dogs are driving and people are like cheering them on as what is happening? Like, how high were the creators of this show? But then we also could see Max just really into it right away, getting it, loving it. We're like, who is Ryder's dad? How did he build all these devices? Who made the tower? Like all the logic questions that you would have as an adult, none of those matter when you're two. You don't know anything yet, right? So like it was a perfect show for that audience. And then we just had to figure out how to pitch ideas for it. And yeah, we both ended up working on it for a few years. And then I got to a point where I was like, I don't think I have any other ideas. Like there have been like 300 episodes at this point, and I think that's part of why it's like now they're flying. Now everyone's got a boat, all the over the years they're in space. Like what's left, Dinosaurs are coming, guys. Like that many shows. I mean, hat is off to the showrunners and the like making that thing and making it work, and because that is like talk about a grind, but very rewarding grind if you stick with it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it became such a huge hit. So, and I wondered if, part of the reason why it might be a hit is this formula that's like, they do a song, there's going to be trouble. They do a catchphrase, they make a plan, they do another song, they save the day. Like,
Yeah.
what's interesting to me is that, from what I understand, this idea of familiarity brings comfort to kids, and so you can
Yeah.
watch these shows and you kind of can anticipate what's going to happen, and that brings them comfort, and that's why these formulas exist. But what I found really interesting is that, even though that idea is like primarily surrounded around preschool shows, it also happens in like CSI and NCIS.
There's a formula, right? Like whether it's a 5-act drama or a 3-act sitcom or a reality show, there's a formula. There's a rhythm to follow that is expected. And like, yeah, Law and Order has a rhythm, right? Like people fall. I don't know if people still watch it at 11 o'clock at night. I know that was like for a long time. It was like bedtime viewing is like murder. But yeah, the familiar, comforting formula is something we all kind of crave, I think.
Yeah, it's funny how that lasts. It's
Yeah,
like almost a genetic thing where it's like it's in
yeah,
you as a kid, and then even now you want to watch murdery formula. It's still
yeah.
a thing.
It's like it's an hour, so I know around the 45-minute mark. Like you just start, there are times where like as a viewer, you like look at the clock. It's like, well, how much is this going to be a two-parter? You start to like those kind of questions because formula works. And I mean that's storytelling. Like before there was TV, there's an expectation when you tell a story. There's going to be a turn, there's going to be a twist, the payoff at the end, like telling a joke, the setup and the punchline. There's a formula, there's a rhythm to it, and sometimes you have an outlier who can tell a joke in a different way. Who can, but Stephen Wright was still doing setup punchline, right? Like it's still kind of essentially you follow the formula and then you vary it.
Alex, you are one of the greatest pitchers I've ever seen. And what I mean for anyone watching is typically when you are a head writer, you'll have an idea or you'll work on an idea in a room with a bunch of writers, and then you have to take those ideas and pitch them to the execs. And the execs, will approve or disapprove of this idea. And a lot of that hinges on how well you execute the pitch. And I think you are an incredible pitcher. So I wonder what makes a good pitch and why are you so darn good at it?
God, what makes a good pitch? I mean, I think loving what you're saying, believing in what you're saying, being excited about the idea. Honestly, I feel like that's half of it. When I'm pitching, it's like I'm excited about this idea. I'm trying to get them excited too. I mean, I smile when I pitch. Like, what are the key things? I have the kind of brain that can sort of retain a lot of information. Like, it's really helped me as a head writer, as a story editor, all that stuff. Because when you're in the room and people are pitching ideas, and then a joke comes from someone over here and a line from someone over there, it's like getting all of that and then kind of combing through and going, what are the, and making sure that funny line I'm going to pitch in the meeting later. But mostly it's just like genuine enthusiasm. If I'm enthusiastic about this idea, then I think I can get them enthusiastic too. I can share my enthusiasm, and I think that's infectious. Like laughter is infectious. When people are laughing, sometimes you know what the joke is, but you start laughing along. I think some of it is that, and maybe some of it too is I'm pitching on behalf of everyone. It's not about me. It's not about my ego. I don't know how great a pitcher I am when it's just me pitching my idea to a network exec, for like trying to get a show off the ground. Am I as good a pitcher? I'm not sure because I don't have that kind of feedback. But when I'm pitching on behalf of a team, then my ego is out of it. It's not about me. It's about the idea. It's about the team. It's about the group agreement that this is fun and we want to make this one. And then I sort of convey that. And I think that's most of it. And timing, I listen for the laughs. I'm trying to time it to get everyone on board, and I'm looking at faces. I when I'm pitching on Zoom, I try to have like I'll adjust my Zoom screen so the script is right below it or right above it, in fact, so that my eyes look like I'm looking at the camera when I'm reading. Because you don't want to
That's
be
smart. That's a good
right.
tip.
Because if I'm doing this, if I'm looking down here telling you a story, how is that helpful? It's
It's
not,
less engaging, yeah, for
right?
sure.
Way less engaging. But if I'm like reading here and saying, so once upon a time, blah, 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 and then it seems like I'm looking at you, I'm doing it off the cuff. That's the other thing I think is like trying to make it feel like it's a conversation instead of reading all the words exactly. Like when I'll just do point form notes for the pitch part because I know I'm hitting these beats, the parts of the story that we want to get to, the scenes. And if I put it into sentences, then they get too long. I can't just at a glance see the idea and then tell them about it. So, yeah, those are my tricks. My tricks are point form, putting the script really close to the camera. And like Zoom pitching is helpful for that. Like pitching in person, you either really have to know your pitch. I mean I try to practice my pitch. If I'm pitching in person, a new series idea or something, I'm going over it. I'm practicing it. I'm trying to make it feel off the cuff and fresh. And like I just thinking of putting it this way right now. Like I haven't done this before, even though. Um, and you want to be off book, like not looking at your script the whole time. And but yeah, with Zoom, I still practice sometimes if it's like a big deal pitch, but like end of the day, at the end of a summit day where you've been sitting around, there's no time to really practice. So you just sort of go over it once, maybe like when we did Dylan. um, we would take half an hour at the end of the summit day. The writers would go, and Emer, Conan, and I would go over, okay, which episodes are we pitching? And then I would say, okay, so I'll say this, I'll tell them about this, that, and then maybe Emer would be, oh, less of this, more of that, and we'd kind of like fine tune it. And then the network is waiting for us to talk to them, and okay, here we go. And then we just pitch it to the producers and the network. And yeah, not a lot of time. But I worked in live TV. I can move fast.
Yeah, I think that's why part of why it was so impressive because there was so little time. And it was like you've just come up with these ideas and you're able to encapsulate them so well and with so much enthusiasm and also throwing in little jokes and making it feel conversational, like you're not just sort of reading a word for word script. So yeah, it was a thing to behold, Alex. It was awesome. I want to get into a little bit of specific advice maybe for
Yeah.
young and up and coming writers. Like if there was someone who wanted to write for let's say animation today, what's something that they can actively do? Let's say they have no contacts, they have no relationships. Should they be writing a spec? Should they be taking people out to lunch? What is the thing that you would recommend?
I would recommend writing specs. Even if you're not going to hand them out to people, the practice of writing is crucial. And I think when you're writing a spec, what it forces you to do is you're picking a show that you want to write a spec about, and then you can't just start writing. You've got to watch that show, you've got to analyze the show, you got to break it down. Like, what is the formula for this show, right? when do these big, when are the act breaks? How long before a commercial? Things like that. Even that, because that when you hand in a spec, if someone's a fan of whatever Big Bang Theory and your spec does not follow the formula, immediately they're going to be like, "Wow, this person doesn't know what they're doing." You want it to look right. You want it to, and then you start getting familiar with what does the script look like, and what does it feel like to hold it, to read it, holding. I guess people don't hold scripts as much now with computers, but that's how old I am. Man, on Made in Canada, I mailed my drafts. I put the like special mail to the first season that I worked on. By the end, I think we were emailing, but yeah, like I literally put it in the mail.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a while. But yeah, I would say write specs for sure, talk to other people, and then to break into the business, write a show, write specs that you feel like fit your voice, fit your sensibility, because then it's easier, right? Than trying to, like me writing a Breaking Bad spec. God, that'd be a lot of work. I don't know that world,
I
but
mean, I want to see that episode. I want to see that Breaking Bad.
first of all, there's no drugs. No. Yeah, I would do all the things though. Yeah, it'd be pretty fun. Well, that's not a good example because it's actually funny a lot of the time. But but yeah, I think find something that you feel comfortable with, that you feel like is your voice, and then in terms of getting the gig, I like get into that production office any way you can. Get like talk to You could talk to agents. You could take someone out for coffee just to pick their brain. If you know someone who's even on the periphery of production, like I think making connections, talking to people really is the the biggest way to sort of get through that door. And if there's an opportunity to pour coffee at this production company, do it. Take it. Say yes. Say yes to the opportunities that come your way, even if you're like, well, I don't want to be an intern though. Just do it. Just do it, because now you're with those people. Now you're part of the team. And who knows, in a year or two, you might be a producer on that show. Or, like any kind of, if you want to be in production, get there. Um, CBC has job postings sometimes, like there's corporate companies and networks that have postings on their websites. I mean, right now it's a tough time to be a writer. There aren't a lot of gigs. There's a lot of nervousness and fear and networks not wanting to spend a lot of money. So keep writing. Write other stuff. Write a play. Put a show on. You don't need a lot of money to put on a show at the Fringe. But you can get a lot of attention from it. That's where I was writing. That's where my shows were happening, and that worked for me. I'd say keep creating. I mean, you could be making stuff. You could be making YouTube. You could be
Making a YouTube podcast.
making a podcast, for example, is a thing that could happen. Yeah, there's something. If you have an idea, like just pursue it. I think, and create. And I think if you keep creating, stuff will happen. Like if you put stuff out into the world, it'll come back to you some way. You'll get. I think, I don't know, man. I'm
No,
so
I
deep in now. I like. If I was just starting today, what would I do? Probably that. I'd be writing specs. I'd be sending them to people, probably unsolicited, saying, "Hey, I don't know if you're open to reading anything, but and I'd be looking for agents, because I feel like that is probably the way to get into the door for a lot of production companies and stuff, is to actually have representation. I don't know how easy it is to do otherwise. I had my backdoor route, and I didn't have an agent until I was working on, I think, Made in Canada. I had already written an episode of Made in Canada, and then it was like, oh, I should really get an agent. But because I was in the CBC system and I was doing award shows and then met Rick and all that, so it's everyone's path is different. But I feel like having an agent really helped.
Yeah, being in the ecosystem in any way,
Yeah.
I think is a good start for people, because it's a weird industry in the sense that, like, nobody really cares if you went to school. Nobody really cares what your experience was. It was like a lot of times I've gotten jobs because someone has been like, "Hey, Mike's cool. Like he'll be fine." You know what I mean? Like, or like Mike's competent. I think that's such a big one. It's like if you can like get your foot in the door and then just prove you're competent,
Yeah,
then a lot of other doors and windows will open up for you. So
for sure.
I
And
guess that.
people want you around because they know they can rely on you, right? In the same way as being before you're a ringer as a writer, you want to be a ringer as a person in the production space in any way, and then things go from there. Yeah, they'll call on you again. Yeah, for sure. And being competent, yeah, boy, like that first day on Rita and Friends in the room full of PAs, there were a lot of people there, and a lot of them did not last. Some of them went on and became producers themselves, or executives even eventually, and some of them just did not do anything because they were not competent. It wasn't the right job for them. So
Fair enough.
yeah.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for being here. I like to end the podcast by asking one question,
Okay.
and that is if you could share a time, either personally or professionally, where you pushed yourself outside of your comfort zone and how that experience changed you.
Think about back in the day, I was doing, a lot of reality, variety, award shows, things like that. I was producing a show called Triple Sensation, and it was like the biggest job to date because I was full on producing and in the edit suite with the editors. It was a big experience, tagging onto all my knowledge from Canadian Idol and taking it further. And then, but the thing I was missing was creating the story. The thing about reality TV is that you're finding the story that exists and you're editing it into place. But when you're a writer, you want to bring the story from the get go, right? And then I got the opportunity to run a season of 16. And I decided to take it, and I was scared because I didn't know what I was doing. And it went a little weird for a bit because the impresario producer, exec producer of Triple Sensation, wanted me to do a second season. And I was like, well, I'd love to, but I actually have this other opportunity. I know great people. I can train someone to do what I did for you. He wasn't that impressed. He sued me for what he thought was a breach of contract
My
because he
God.
thought the contract said basically he owned me and I couldn't refuse an offer from him for a season two. And I was like, well, that's not what it says at all. I was served papers on like Christmas Eve by this guy who I'm not going to name because if you want to look it up, you can look it up. The show is called Triple Sensation. But yeah, I had to hire lawyers. It depleted my savings, but eventually I'll just get it thrown out of court. This litigious impresario didn't get to own me, and then so that was all happening, and at the same time I was like, how do you head write? So it was a very challenging time, and I thought I was going to lose the head writing job when Tom McGillis called me to say, hey, because I had submitted some scripts from other writers, but I hadn't done the thing of conforming it to my voice at that point. And he kind of said to me, this is what is actually, you need to do. We want you on the page, on all the pages. And so I really thought I was about to lose the job that I had gotten sued for taking. But I managed to climb through it. A lot of flop sweat, a lot, a lot of panic, made it through, and it was like the best decision I ever made because getting into the animation world has been great. I like the rhythm, I like the routine. It's been possible to have a kid and work from home and all that kind of stuff. And it's storytelling, and it is what I love. And whether it's for little guys or grown-ups, I like telling stories and entertaining and making people laugh. So I was, yeah, it was a scary transition, but definitely worth it.
Well, I'm glad you made that transition because you've definitely found your place
Yeah.
in the animation side of things. I think you're an amazing writer, and
Oh,
I'm
thanks.
so glad to have had the chance to interview you. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks for asking me. This has been really fun. I really enjoyed it.